Nope, just 1 minute.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remain standing for a moment of silence for the upcoming Memorial Day holiday and those who gave their lives for our country. Thank you.
Mr. President, move to close executive session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. President, move to seal the minutes to the executive session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah,
Mr. President,
yes.
motion to hire DeSisto Law to assist the town with pending litigation for GD Richmond River policy.
Before we get there, Dr. Tremor, that no votes were taken in executive session.
Okay, no votes were taken, executive session. All right, now we may proceed.
So much as I already said.
And second,
Okay, all those in favor?
aye.
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 Next matter, business. I lost my train of thought.
Mr. President,
Yeah,
move to approve consent agenda.
Mr.
A
President,
1, 2.
hold on, hold on.
point of order.
Yeah,
Sorry, we have public hearing first. Mr. President,
yeah,
motion to open public hearing for the outdoor entertainment license of Washington County Pomona Green.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Accused.
Favor?
Oh, yes, aye. Sorry.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hi,
My name is Al Giorgio. I'm an attorney at Inman & Torgy. I do represent the Washington County Pomona Grange in regards to their licensing moving forward for this August. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Fish right now, who is going to explain the application in detail.
Worthy council members, my name is Clyde P. Fish. I am chairman of Washington County Fair. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the 35 nonprofit organizations that we serve, on behalf of the hundreds of FFA and 4-H members who do the amazing project at the fair, on behalf of thousands of patrons who come to the fair, requesting the outdoor entertainment permit, as I have for the past 4 years. Obviously, it's the same entertainment permit we've always asked for. We're asking for 3 waivers, as we always do. One is for on-site camping, because the 4-H and FFA do camp there to take care of the animals as well as staff. The other one is for, the permit is till 11 o'clock at night, and all mechanical poles, all that ends at 11. However, once in a great while, we have the ox pole may go till 11:30, creates no noise, and I asked for an extension on that. And the other thing was the number of policemen. If you look at on the permit, it has 1 policeman per 150 people. The police chief always sets the number of police in their posts. So I asked for that waiver. And those are the waivers that we always consistently ask for. And other than that, I have nothing else, unless there's any question.
I have no question. Go ahead.
There was a problem with the parking where our DPW director, who is also the fire chief, had to shut things down. So I was just wondering, Just for some clarification as to exactly what happened.
Well, I wish I knew what happened. I mean, what happened was, and I can tell you from my opinion, what happened was Friday, we had that ring. There were tornadoes in the northern end of the state, people remember. And Friday was a horrible day for us. We did not have a good day. Saturday turned out to be perfect weather. Now, I've been doing the fair and I've been in charge of parking for years. And we always get a turnover in the afternoon. For some reason this year, we didn't get a turnover. And then traffic stopped and people started parking on the road, which they've never done that before. When they did that, people started walking down 112 and the police and Scott Arbor, who was the fire chief, shut down the fairgrounds, which was the wise and intelligent thing to do. And like I said, for some reason, we didn't get a turnover. Now, we have had meetings with the town, along with the fire chief, the police chief, and we've come up with some solutions to hopefully prevent that. But like I said, that's the first time it's ever happened in 57 years. And our attendance Saturday was not a record Saturday, it was an average Saturday. Matter of fact, Sunday was better and Sunday were fun. So what we've done to correct that is, we've made improvements to the off-site lot that we use on Whipple Trail, which was the first year I'm sorry, not Whipple Trail, on on Beaver River Road. It was the first year we used that lot. It wasn't as efficient as we wanted it to. We're gonna put no parking signs back up and down the road, which they're there. And rope off areas where people can pull off of to park on the road. And that was really the issue last year, was people parked on the road. We're gonna change our entertainment schedule to do away with a Saturday afternoon show, which will entice people not to stay. So we'll get that turnover. We're going to work with the carnival, hopefully, depending upon the amount of employees he has, to start the carnival rides earlier in the day. Again, so we get that turnover at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, that we always have that.
Excuse me, what time do they typically start?
They usually start at 12. I mean, the fair opens at 8,
Yeah.
but they usually start at 12. We're going to rent, which I talked to the chief tonight, we have already reserved 4 traffic message boards put on 138 and wherever the chief deems necessary to prevent people from parking on the street. We have a traffic engineer who I met with today, who's studying the circle and to determine the best flow of traffic, and we will have a meeting with the police department later on this month to confirm the best way to handle traffic. We also put in a new gate, which is in the fairgrounds. One of the problems is to allow people who don't need to purchase a ticket to enter the fair quicker. And you say, well, how's that going to help traffic? If you're waiting an hour and a half an hour to get to the fairgrounds, if you get in there quicker, you're going to leave the fairgrounds a half an hour earlier, so therefore we should get a turnover. So we have addressed it. We're coming up with a plan. The question is going to be, and hopefully it was just a one-time, like I said, the attendance was not greater than it ever has been. It was just the fact that no one left, I think, that caused that. And the people parking on the street. If the people hadn't parked on the street, I don't think we would have any issue at all.
Are you going to discuss with the chief about adding extra detail?
That's up to him. I mean, I don't know if that was the answer because the traffic people were out there, but that was up to him.
I mean, you had just a perfect storm of so many people converging on the town. A lot of them were out of state and through Massachusetts. And the concern was, you have so many people coming at one time. People are creatures of habit. They want convenience. They see 2 other people parking the shoulder of the road, they do the same thing. And then it got dark. Concern was you could have pedestrians walking when there is no sidewalk or shoulder, getting struck by other vehicles where you have limited visibility. So they made that call at that time, but we'll have adequate personnel. And thank you for that.
Any other question? How about the public? Question from the public?
Hearing
Mr.
none.
President?
Yes.
Yeah. Could you come up to the podium and identify yourself, please?
Thank you all for your time. My name is Rebecca Benarzik. I am a Richmond town resident and have lived here since about 2013. Prior to that, I grew up in the town of Exeter, just a hop, skip, jump away. I've been involved with the fair for many, many years, since I was about 3 years old, and moving forward. So I think this is a wonderful event for the community. I think it's always brought, a lot of interest. It's brought people in that aren't familiar with our area. They aren't even sure where South County, Rhode Island is, honestly. So I do think it's a wonderful event, and I hope that you'll give us your consideration in moving this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Prince. I'm also a member of the Washington County Fair Committee. I've lived in Richmond my whole life and I agree with everything that you said.
No, I agree with everything both of you. So,
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Anybody in sight of me?
Okay,
Mr. President,
yes.
motion to close public hearing. Oh, no, would you mind?
Yeah, no, sorry, I
I'm
just
so
didn't see it.
sorry. Don't apologize.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Onek, and I'm a resident of Richmond for the last 5.5 years. Before that, I was in Westerly for 20 years. When I decided to buy a home, which is now in Richmond, I bought it because of the town. We have a great school system. We care about our children. The fair does everything for children. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go there and see these children be able to show the animals. Last year, we had children come in from Providence. And it was really cute. They said to draw a picture of a farm animal. They drew a giraffe. They have never seen anything like that. This town is about families, children, community. The fair represents that, I'm sorry, more than anything. And we support everyone around. So I know it's kind of crazy that I bought a home because I care about the community.
No,
That's-
that's not crazy, no.
That's why we chose Richmond.
Right.
And we love our home and we do anything for it and the town. We're also volunteer firefighters, my family is, and it's great.
Wow.
So the fair means a lot in this town and people don't realize it. It's for the children.
I know that the first 4 years that I moved here in 2005 from East Greenwich. And the first 4 years I lived here, I volunteered at the fair for different events and displays. So,
The fair is its own family.
oh, yeah.
And it is, you know, I'm not related to Cindy, but let me tell you,
You look like
it's like my sister. You know, there isn't anything that I wouldn't do for them, and I know there isn't anything I wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't do for me. And we feel the same way about our people in our town.
Yeah.
If somebody says we need help, let me tell you, there's nobody stronger. So we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Cindy Adams. I'm secretary of the Washington County Fair, and I'm also a Richmond resident. I moved here in 2022. I mean, 2020, sorry. Jeez. And two girls in one's in the Charahoe school system, the other one graduated from Charahoe. She's in the nursing program at URI. I love Richmond. It's a great town. I love the fair. I can say honestly, last year was really hard when everything got shut down, but it was felt amongst the fire, the police, us. So we're really hoping for the opportunity to bring it better this year.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further input?
Mr. President,
Yes.
last call. Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. President, move to approve the outdoor entertainment license applications for the Washington County Warmer Garage DBA Washington County Fair.
All those in favor?
Sorry, before you make that motion, typically we waive the entertainment fee for the fair as a nonprofit, so that should be included in the motion, but not the admin fee. But we do, so we would need payment of the admin fee as well as final building inspections and sign off, but we need a motion to waive the outdoor
Can you check
entertainment.
tonight? Mr. President, move to approve the outdoor entertainment license for the Washington County Fair in lieu of the entertainment license fee, but they have to pay.
Admin.
Waiver.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you can still volunteer. You only did it for a year. It's an open door policy.
I have been sick for a while.
Come see us for a stuffed waffle. You're really, really good.
We stuck them with.
Anything you want.
Oh, wow.
Get a lot of options there. They're really-
Item number 2. Yeah.
Motion to open the public hearing for the zoning ordinances. Do I have to be?
Just the one chapter.
All right, chapter 18. Chapter 18.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Could you introduce yourself and describe what's in?
Sure. I'm Paula Gillette, town planner. This grouping of changes largely arises from changes that were made to state law that govern zoning and land development and subdivisions. Some of the proposed amendments are related to the elimination of the public informational meeting at the master plan stages review for major projects, a reconfiguration of the responsibilities of the planning board and the zoning board, a revised criteria for the issuance of special use permits, an amended permitting process for projects that seek relief from local regulations. It's something called Unified Development Plan Review. The creation of a new appeal process and a land use calendar in Superior Court. We no longer have SHAP. Changes to thresholds for minor and major projects, a potential transfer of responsibilities from municipal board to the administrative officer, and changes to how development plan review is used. Now, you've all received this packet, which includes all of the memos that I've drafted with those changes, as well as the texts of each of the chapters that have been amended. If you have specific questions, I think it would make the most sense to probably go through chapter by chapter if you have specific questions in each chapter, as opposed to skipping around between each. But it's ultimately the town council's prerogative to review this in the manner that you're so inclined to do. So if you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If I can't answer them immediately, I'll write them down and answer them at a future point in time. As I mentioned previously, when you were setting the hearing date, if you feel comfortable adopting these changes, you're welcome to do so at this evening's meeting. But if you have questions or you have concerns, you're welcome to continue this public hearing to another date certain.
I have confidence that the people who worked on this did a much better job than I could do by reviewing. So, I don't know if anyone else has questions.
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
I wrote a lot of questions as I went along, but it really comes down to two things that are my major question. As I read along, it sounded as if we are going to have ADUs and there's nothing we can do about it. And then when I got to page 139, and it says any municipality that chooses to permit ADUs. So do we have to have them or don't have to have them?
So a municipality, that's a great question. A municipality has the ability to deny ADUs in their entirety, but any community that allows ADUs has to allow them within the scope of what's allowed under state law. So if a community doesn't want to have any ADUs whatsoever, that's their prerogative. But it's really up to a specific town on whether or not they want to have an ADU as an allowed use in an area.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
You expound, to walk your question, all right? Explain what ADUs are and what the scope of an ADU would be in different settings, different zonings and alike. Because
So an ADU is an acronym for accessory dwelling unit. It is by virtue of the word accessory, it is subservient to a principal dwelling. It is going to be smaller. It is at certain points in previous iterations of the language that governs it at the state level, there are certain elements that are required and there are certain elements that are not, and that has actually changed recently. It's special regulations, correct, that deals with ADUs, I believe. Let me check. There are so many that it's hard for me to keep track of everything immediately.
but largely an ADU is meant to be a smaller dwelling for someone on the same lot as a principal dwelling.
Like an in-law apartment, but
Yes,
separate from the
that's-
house.
That's another phrase to describe it. I've also heard them referred to as granny flats, which is just another kind of term for an in-law.
Wash that term.
Yes, yeah.
It can be separate, it can also be contained within the private.
Yep, it can be
Be either
built,
one.
yep, and it attached or detached. So either option is available.
And it
So-
doesn't have to be granny.
No, it does
doesn't have
not,
to
it
be
does not have to
relative
be
at all.
limited to your grandmother.
Correct.
It does not even, under the new state law, it can't unless. So there are certain ways in which a community can limit who lives in an ADU, but it's based upon the kind of subsidy that's associated with that ADU. So you can only limit it based upon someone's age or their relationship to the party who lives in the primary structure. If the overarching mechanism that allows that ADU to even come into being requires that kind of connection.
So right now, the ADU does not help our affordable housing percentage if you have mom living in a separate, apartment to the house.
It can. So under the new legislation at the state level, ADUs can be counted. There are certain elements that are related to it. It has to be deed restricted, for a certain period of time. Typically, if it's a rental, it would have to be about, and it's geared towards people who make 80% or less of the area median income, but they can be counted towards affordable housing. Yes.
And what would that time frame be? Is it a 4 or 5 year lease that you would have with that
It's
person?
typically a year.
1 year lease, that's
1
it.
year. But it would be for each year of the existence of that ADU for that, and it would count towards those purposes. But as soon as someone who's not making 80% of the area median income no longer lives in the ADU, then it would no longer be considered an affordable unit. So it would be taken off of that list of the calculus that we have in town.
How about a trailer? If you're say like on a 1 acre or 2 acre lot or R3, and you put a trailer, would that be considered an ADU? And that could be used for a percentage of our affordable housing?
No, a trailer would not be able to be used in Richmond. A trailer can be used on a property. And trailer is not necessarily even the word that I would use because there are specific connotations associated with all of these different kinds of words. Trailer, mobile home, manufactured housing, they're all different ideas. And they all have different parameters associated with them.
Think of the ones with the tires on them still.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that you could have one of those if, say, your house burned down and you were in the process of rebuilding your house, you could live on your lot in an RV or comparable type structure while your house is being constructed. But once it was constructed, you would no longer be able to live in your RV. I mean, why would you necessarily want to if you have a full house right there that you built? So that's something that would be a limiting factor. You wouldn't be allowed to just put a trailer down on your property and say, this is now my ADU. So,
Mhm.
And I think as long as it's regulated, you're allowing people to have the freedom to do with their property as they see fit without the government coming down saying, hey, you can't do that, you can't do this. With so many restrictions, what is the benefit of owning a piece of property if you can do nothing with it that you want to do with it?
So I know, all right,
Yeah.
there was talk about manufactured home that was from before 1976 or after
Yes.
1976.
yes.
But I couldn't quite get the difference. Is it that they're better after 76?
So in 1976, there was, I believe it was, I don't remember the name of the type of document, but basically HUD made a determination that there would be certain kinds of elements that would be required in a manufactured home. And so they're built to a different standard than a mobile home built before 1976. So
Fire
we-
stops.
Yeah, we colloquially refer to trailers and mobile homes and manufactured homes all within kind of the same vernacular, but they're different things. one of the most important distinctions is that a mobile home, which is built before 1976, cannot be, it can't be designated by HUD as being a unit that would be available for affordable housing. A manufactured home, which could look, you could have a mobile home that rolls off of the lot, and then you have a manufactured home that rolls off, and they could be virtually identical in appearance, but there are different standards associated with the manufactured home. And so they are unlike a stick-built construction where, you know, you're building the house there, it can be transported and placed. And so it can be a somewhat more affordable option for people than just a stick-built home. This was the subject of a great deal of discussion by the planning board because, I mean, before I did investigative work into this, I didn't know that there was really a difference between a manufactured home and a mobile home. You know, they seem very similar to me, but they're different. And so it's another mechanism. I know that there's been interest at the state level in relation to manufactured housing. And that also had some influence on the discussion that the board had, but I don't, to my knowledge, that hasn't necessarily passed the state as of yet. It very well could, but that's been a discussion that's been had at the state level in relation to manufactured housing.
So manufactured houses are still not allowed on residential properties, or they are allowed?
So right now, we don't have a designation for manufactured housing. So one thing that was proposed in our district use table would be to create a use code that is for a manufactured home, a single manufactured home. So a person, if you were to buy a vacant lot, you'd be able to have the vacant lot and you'd be able to put your single manufactured home on that lot. And that would become use code 114.
So in a neighborhood that has houses that are already built, but there's an empty lot, and someone could put a manufactured house in that empty lot.
If the council adopts this, yes. They would be able to do that.
One of my other concerns is that in the R1 area, they're allowing two-family houses. And some of the lot dimensions don't seem very big to me. So I just really don't want our town to look like Providence.
Referring to duplexes. Duplex.
Well,
It could be a duplex. It might not necessarily look like a duplex. So the recommendation to have that change was something that was recommended by Karen Ellsworth, which was to allow two-family homes by right in neighborhood business and agricultural overlay, as well as two-family structures are already permitted in R1. It's not as though that's something new. It just would be now allowed in neighborhood business and agricultural overlay. So you can presently have a two-family home in R1 that presently exists.
I think the problem is that housing is no longer affordable, and I've done a lot of work with the homeless over the last 3-4 years. The price of apartments is obscene. My daughter just got a new apartment. Her rent is triple what my mortgage was on my house down the road. And we say we want to do something about affordable housing, and then on the other hand, we say, but not in my neighborhood, not in my town. And so meanwhile, people are homeless. So I don't know, I support this for what it's worth. I think that if it's done correctly and regulated properly, it will add to our town, not detract.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you saying that, just because I wholeheartedly agree that we need to, do something about affordable housing, and I know that a lot of this was outside of our control.
but I reviewed it and it's all good. I did just have, and I appreciate, I want to say while I have the floor, I appreciate all the work the planning board went into this. I don't know if you guys watched, because it's available on YouTube, but they have very in-depth and thorough discussions. And I think that we should be thankful that we have such a great planning board with a great panel of experts. I'm sure we can all agree on that. But I just had a question, because I'm gonna be quite honest. I watched the planning board meetings, I read your memo. But I didn't really compare your memo to the law. So I just wanted to know, council making a decision where you had options, where you said, solicitor Ellsworth had it like this, but I prefer that. Are we adopting your preferences? Like what is,
It's
or
whichever.
do we have to go, because I marked them, like, do we have to go through those individually as a part of the process?
Yes, I would say it would be up to you. I mean, in those situations, I gave you the option. You could
Okay.
select the one that had been drafted by Karen. I think that there's probably,
There's like three,
there are very limited
There's not.
examples of that. Either option is fine. I've discussed all of them with Chris, and his sentiments were basically that either would be fine, whether it's what Karen drafted or what comes from state law, would be sufficient. So.
So one more before you change topics, I would just like to, yeah.
In those three, where I thought you said you had a choice. Karen's version is consistent with
Right.
the state law. It's not that it's different. It is consistent with the state law. That's, so I want
Right,
to.
no, I appreciate clarifying that, because it was written, like, in the memo, it was written that way too, where like, either's fine, my preference is this, right even down to the way the numbers are written, which I personally disagree with, but we'll agree with you guys, where you guys write it with numerically instead of written out. So I would like to go with like, so I don't have page numbers, but there's a spot where you say, my preference is for past solicitor's definition. My preference is for state law definition. I would just like to, for all three, go with the town planner's, definitions. I think that's all I have to say.
You're talking about to write out the numbers rather than just write the number.
Oh, no, I wasn't gonna be picky about that. I was just saying that kind of, as a joke, so I apologize. But no, there's some, like, just, there was one where Solicitor Ellsworth wrote, a definition, and she preferred that definition to the state law. And then there's another one where she preferred state law to the definition, so it kind of happened both ways. Both are fine, both are legal, both are correct, as Solicitor Zangari said. But I just didn't know if that was our choice, that we should be making that choice as part of our discussion. I just didn't want it to be overlooked.
Well, it's very much your choice.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Elliot, just to give the public, because, you've spent so much time and a lot of people, they don't attend the planning board meetings, they don't watch them on YouTube and whatnot. Just to kind of give them a quick overview, would you say that these zoning had to be changed due to the state regulations, the state law coming down and dictating to us, dictating to other towns? It's not just Richmond that are gonna, implement these. Is it 60% that the state said we had to change to conform to them? Is it 80%, or every single one of them, I think is 100% that we had to revisit and redo in conjunction with what the state wanted us to do?
So are you asking if all of the proposed amendments arose from state law?
Yes.
I would say that about 95% of them did arise from changes that were made at the state level. There are a couple of small examples that were things that are not related to state law. For example, in relation to the section on equestrian facilities, there was a woman who contacted Solicitor Ellsworth a couple of years ago now, who has a pet horse, and the only way that she can keep the horse is if she has one or two children ride the horse and pay for the riding lessons. And so past Solicitor Ellsworth thought that that was reasonable to allow someone to be able to have that kind of very, very small use of allowing someone to keep the horse and have them have the horse ridden, and that pays for the feed and the medical care. So, that's part of that very small percentage of things that aren't related to state law, but
So
it's
95%.
yes,
About
it's
95%. So if you were to go to Exeter, South Kingstown, North Kingstown, every single one of their zoning, regs would have to be changed in the same consistency as ours, so there's not gonna be too much variation
Yeah,
in that 95%.
there's not gonna be too much variation.
Right. Just to let everybody know, we had no choice.
Mr. Trump.
Yes.
I don't know if that's necessarily in the beginning. And I'm not saying that it was, but having more consistency throughout the towns can make it streamlined for people who are building. You know, and it just makes it easier to know, like, I'm not gonna have a weird niche in this town, or like, you know, just a weird niche in that town. So, I think it's a positive thing. And, I don't have anything else to say, I think.
There are benefits and drawbacks.
Yes.
I would say, it certainly is useful from a developer's perspective to have more uniform regulations across communities. I don't view all of the changes that have come from the state as being negative. I don't view all of them as being positive either. Mostly I'm neutral about a lot of them because it's what has been enacted, and we have to abide by what's been enacted. State law supersedes most local regulations.
If
So-
we can get housing to just a few people that before this couldn't afford it, then we've accomplished something.
And Mr. President, if the ADUs are done well, it also could provide income for some older people who could use that income, and also maybe
Like when I
they could,
retired.
they could have a company who lives in the other house, but
Right.
is attached to them. So, I mean, I am not against these things. I just think we have to be careful, that's all. And in terms of the, I like your interpretations, mostly the wording that you used. And my preference would be to write the letter, the number out, and then put the number, but that probably would be too much work to have to do both. So if I had to go for one, I would go for the written number.
Either is fine. That was a grammatical choice that past solicitor Ellsworth favored. I'm fine if you want to adopt it. I'm fine if you don't want to adopt it. It would just be a matter of my going in and removing the strike through, which is not a particularly complicated process for me to go through. I mean, it would consume some time, but it's not
It was a ton
anything,
of work.
it's not anything insurmountable. If that's the preference of the council, I'm fine with that. I don't see any reason why we necessarily need to remove the wording and just have the numbers, but that was her preference, and instead of my going back and changing all of those things back again, thought I would present it to the council, and if you're interested in making that change, fine. If you are not interested in making that change, also fine.
Mr. President, in terms of, what the state told us we had to do because it was passed in the General Assembly, and it does give consistency, to each prospective town, you know what I mean, around us. And it could be a plus, and like you said, it could be a little bit of a negative too. But, as far as I'm concerned, the big thing is, and Counselor Sheehan mentioned this, and that were my thoughts too, is that you have a lot of aging population here in Richmond. And, they have a big home, or, they get, these beautiful garages. With lofts that they could rent to supplement their income to, help them stay, in Richmond. And, they've been living here for like 50, 60 years. We want to help. So that 5%, if we can, really help, our residents out with that. And then with the ADUs, that we're able to massage those a little bit, as we go along, to help our residents out. I think if that's the best, we can do, I'd like to see it. Yeah, definitely.
Well, to add to what Councilor Santi just said, there are farms in our town that have turned to solar panels because they can't afford to keep the farm anymore. If they could put a few ADUs on that farm, they may not have to turn to solar panels. So it could be a win in that regard too. I'd like to, at this point, invite people in the audience to ask questions if they had any.
I would just note that it's likely that it would be one ADU per residence, so it's not as though you'd necessarily be able to have like a village of.
No.
ADUs. Just when you said, oh, before, I
Yeah, but I mean,
envisioned like 10 cropping up in a near a farm, and I was going, no, it's not the intent.
No.
Mhm.
So just to be clear.
you're a scholar.
President,
Mention that with a 10-foot pole.
before,
Again, I invite the public to ask questions and.
Yeah.
Talia, can you just, if you, advise on the chapters that have been removed from consideration for this evening?
So there's one chapter that's been removed from consideration. It's chapter 1859 modification. That still has a little bit more work that I need to do on it. There were some changes that had been drafted by the past solicitor that I still need to work through. So that's the only one that has been,
Okay.
but that was,
Sorry, there was another one that you said that we didn't have to because there was no changes, right? 1821. Did I write that one down right? So, oh, it's just a section of it, never mind, that's why I had it, it wasn't the, yeah, sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
no, don't worry.
Stop.
I would say that for 1826, there weren't substantive changes that were made. It was just largely grammatical changes in relation to the numerical schematic.
So we're gonna have a couple that we're gonna decide on next time. We're gonna keep the public hearing open for those three. Mr. President.
Yes,
That's just one.
Right,
oh,
one.
just the
Just for
one,
the one.
the 18-50.59, correct?
Yes.
So again, is there anyone going once, going twice, anyone online?
President, move to close public hearing.
That's not what he just said. He just advised us what we had to do.
Because there's still one they have to decide. We're gonna keep it open.
Just for that one?
Yes, we're gonna
Yeah,
keep the public hearing,
Okay.
open.
Mr. President,
Okay.
But you can,
motion to close public hearing with the exception of 18.59.
That's what I was
You have
gonna,
a second?
that's what I was gonna say.
good catch.
All right, all those in favor?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second.
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And would you want to continue that
Yeah.
up to a date certain, so you don't have to
Yes.
re-advertise it?
Yes.
Mr. President, motion to continue chapter 18.59's public hearing
Second.
So,
to
The next
Next
meeting.
council meeting.
next council? Next council meeting.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, do we want to vote on that?
Mr. President?
Yeah.
Motion to approve all of these chapters listed, do I have to list them all? With the exception of 18.59.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Question, we should really do discussion on motions.
Can you clarify on what version we're going with on
Oh,
those two options?
With the town planner for recommendations, that's the motion.
Okay, that's an amended motion.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a question?
Who was the second?
Second on the amendment.
You had a question.
Hold on, no, Aaron asked me if I second that.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Welcome. I'll just stand up here because I'm that for the next one anyway.
Mr. President, move to open public hearing on discussion and consideration of proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan, future land map use and zoning map amendment concerning property on KG Ranch Road designated as lot 2-1 on tax assessors plate 3B. Amendments requested by the town of Richmond for the installation of a 4-lot chlorination system for the public water system.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
While I can stay up here, I think it would be I think it behooves you to invite Bob Ferrari up to speak in relation to the necessity of this change and why it's being proposed. He can speak to some specifications associated with the system itself as well that are not particularly in my wheelhouse, as I'm not a designer of these kinds of systems, nor an operator of these kinds of systems.
Oh,
So
Bob, I invite you up to.
Excuse me, Mr. President, before Talia leaves the podium,
I can just loiter
we,
over
we,
here.
we had discussed about the acreage.
Mhm.
What's the proposed amount of acreage to be rezoned?
So it would be the entirety of the parcel,
The 28 acres?
yes.
Okay.
And as I noted, I mentioned this at both planning board meetings where this was discussed and at the previous town council meeting, that the only allowed use on this property per the deed restrictions are related to work for the water line. It cannot be used for any other purpose whatsoever. So that just bears repeating many, many, many times.
So no ADUs?
No ADUs,
Okay.
no ADUs there.
Thank you.
Well,
Good evening, and yes, there are no ADUs.
let me know if you want me to hold this up at any point.
Yeah. I want to provide a little background, which will carry us from the origination of this project to currency, you understand the context.
Would you identify yourself for the record?
Apologies, thank you, Chris. Robert F. Ferrari, registered professional engineer, president of Northeast Water Solutions. And we serve as the certified public water system operators for the town of Richmond municipal water system. And by default, we're the de facto water department. Community. We've been under contract with the town since October 1st, 2022. This project originated 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, due to some water quality issues. The town executed in 2020 a consent agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Health. That consent agreement required the town to install what they call 4-log chlorination, and that's to disinfect the water for protect against bacterial contamination of the water. There was a schedule in the original consent agreement, and that's been extended a number of times. In 2000, design was completed by another engineering firm, and in 2022, the Department of Health issued their what they call their preliminary approval design. And at that point, we still needed some additional approvals. It wasn't until June of 2023 that the Department of Health issued the certificate of approval for the project, which at this point was 3 years after the original consent agreement was signed with Department of Health. That certificate of approval advised the town of Richmond was responsible for obtaining any other necessary permits or approvals from any federal or state agency for the implementation of the system. Also with that was by Department of Health what they call a finding of no significant impact. And that advised that the state had reviewed the environmental report prepared for the project and had reviewed it and approved it. And the project was not expected to have any adverse environmental impacts, either individually by itself or in combination with any other work being done. What ultimately happened is, following the receipt of the certificate of approval, my firm, since we were already in a contract with the town, we were retained to provide construction administration services on behalf of the town. This past late winter or early spring, the project went out to bid. We obtained, we had a bidding process, contractor was selected. And in the context of reviewing the design documents, one of our senior engineers identified that there was a couple of, we had an issue, and one of the issues was that, that there might be a question about the zoning of the land for this parcel relative to the intended use. And also that we actually, were in, from two sides, we were in wetlands buffer zones, and we were gonna have to obtain the appropriate freshwater wetlands permit from DEM, and also that associated with this particular location and the equipment to be installed there, we were going to need, we had a small side stream because we're monitoring the water, and I'll explain that in a second. And we were going to need what they call an underground injection control permit, or a UIC permit, also from DEM. We did consult with Talia to verify whether or not there was an issue with the zoning of this parcel. Talia confirmed that in conjunction, I think, with some other folks in town. In the interim, we filed the appropriate applications with DEM for the underground injection control permit and the freshwater wetlands permit. Both were granted. In fact, we received them on May 16th of 2024. In any event, what the parcel in question, this project, construct a 4-log chlorination system, involves improvements within the existing pump house, which is far down KG Ranch Road. It's in proximity to the Wood River. Most of the system and the controls are being installed within the existing pump house, so it's unaffected as far as any other regulatory requirements or issues. However, any 4-log chlorination system is required to have what they call a water quality monitoring station. The water quality monitoring station must be located far enough from the point of the chlorine addition. The reactions have had time to go to completion, and then you monitor for the free chlorine residual in the water. You have to be far enough from the point of injection for it to be a valid location. However, you also have to have the station located before your first service connection. So we have a limited area in which this can be installed. Now, I can't speak for the design engineer, but this site was located at the time as being apparently the best location for this. What is proposed to be installed on this location is a small fenced-in area, rectangular fence. Within that fence, I think it's like 12 by 16, if I recall correctly. Thank you. There'd be a small concrete pad. On it would be what we refer to as a hot box construction. It's a weather-tight heated box that you purchase. The instrumentation is inside to do the residual monitoring. And because this has to function 24/7, 365, there's an emergency generator that goes with it. It's a small generator, but we need to have one with a transfer switch, propane tanks, etc. Because if we lose primary power, there is a statutory requirement that you have to get a minimum of 1 chlorine residual sample every 4 hours. So if we have a loss of primary power, say due to a storm, it's important to have the standby power supply. So that's the simplistic description of what is going on in this very small portion of this parcel. Now, the existing 12-inch transmission main, we're right adjacent to it. Of course, it's through here. You have an easement that main is installed in, and this equipment within this fenced-in area would be immediately adjacent to it. And there's also going to be a small dry well, because to monitor for your free flowing residual, you're required to take a very small side stream of the flowing water. It's pumped through the instrument and then it's discharged. The flow rate, we're typically talking probably 50 or 60 gallons per day. Could be a little more. You can adjust the instruments to adjust the sampling rate. So it's not a large side stream discharge, but you can't just discharge that onto the ground. It has to discharge into a dry well, and that was the need for the underground injection control permit from DEM. And because we were located within, actually we had buffer zones from wetlands buffers from 2 sides overlapping on this parcel, we had to get the freshwater wetlands permit approval, as I mentioned. That's also great. So that's the background. That's a simplistic description of what's going to happen. The parcel is currently zoned COS, which is Conservation Open Space, and the request was to have it rezoned for public and governmental, use. The B, this is the only modification. This equipment with this fencing enclosure is the only modification proposed for this parcel. That summarizes what I'm offering as an initial presentation of what we're doing here.
Yes.
I just want to say, thank you for coming out. I know the planning board has recommended it, members of council have recommended it. So thank you so much for your time, because that was really thorough and, it was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just one quick question, the discharge that has to be done every day, that 30 to 50 gallons to flush the system?
No, that's actually to measure the chlorine residual. You have to have the measure in the actual water. So we'll have a small tap on the existing transmission main. It'll bring a stream of water into the enclosure, the hot box enclosure, where we have the monitoring instrumentation, and it will actually measure the chlorine residual in that side stream. Once it's gone through the instrument, we can't put it back in the transmission main, so we have to dispose of it. Okay, so that's where the dry well comes into play.
And this would be the water people would be drinking.
Yes, that's correct.
So I think it's kind of, when I heard you say that, I think it's kind of funny that we're drinking it, but then when it gets discharged, we have to jump through hoops to put it into the, have it hit the ground and get absorbed into the ground, and people are drinking that water. I just find that kind of like,
No one flooding the neighborhood.
kind of
Well,
funny.
Well,
I'm thinking more towards like.
let's keep something in mind.
Let's just,
Think of it in terms of this way, you bring the water into your house, you drink the water, you use it, cooking, showering, etc., and it goes into your on-site septic system. Okay, so you think it that way. The regulatory process of the rules and regulations are a strange and wonderful thing, and we have to play by the rules, and we're happy to do so. But the gentleman here is correct. Putting 50 or 60 gallons a day on the ground, maybe in the middle of August isn't a big deal. It could become a bigger deal in January if it freezes and creates a small frozen pond or something like that. So we're playing by the rules, and that's what was required. And the good news is DEM was very cooperative, facilitated a very quick turnaround time on the applications, knowing that we were waiting to get into construction.
yes. How deep is the dry well?
The moment here, I wrote these drawings for a reason. The dry well, the bottom of the dry well is about 3.5 feet below grade, and underlying that there is gravel, which extends about another 1.5 feet. So total depth is about 5 feet plus below grade.
And you guys have already done like a perk test to make sure
That was
plenty of absorption.
Yeah, that was done originally by the design engineer. So in fact,
So the absorption rate is.
that's fine. Yeah, if anything, it's oversized for what we're putting into it.
And how many times a day does it happen? How many times a day does it?
Well, that's what is adjustable in the instrument.
Yeah,
I'd like to have a reading like every 15 minutes, which moderates the amount of sample volume you have to use. Some people feel compelled that they want a reading every minute, or every 2 minutes or 5 minutes. I don't think it's very necessary we don't anticipate it's going to change that rapidly. It's typically, and with the way the system is designed, it should be at that point downstream from the point of injection, it should be relatively stable. So I think once every 15 minutes is appropriate, and that will also moderate the volume. Okay. And while providing us enough data to keep all of our friends in the regulatory agencies extremely happy.
and how far down KG Branch Road is that line? Charlie, can you just give me like a,
Yeah, actually,
can you give me like a side road off of it? Fast check, I mean.
It's past Valley Lodge. It's
No,
just
past
beyond
Pine Shadows.
the edge of Valley Lodge.
Is that,
Estates.
just past Pine Shadows
Okay,
before Cherry Lane.
okay, yeah, I know.
Right next to.
I have some questions
Yeah.
when this gentleman finishes.
Yeah.
It is.
We'll get.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Mark, I do have someone online too,
Okay,
whenever
so-
you're ready.
Now I turn it over to the people in our public here first, and then we'll address the online people. And you, sir? Yes.
My name is Dennis McGinnity, live at 104 Cage Ranch Road. And this little building that's gonna be built, flushing water out with chlorine in it, is gonna be out, I can see it out my back window. It's gonna be right next to my property. They're gonna be building this thing right there. They're gonna be flushing water out of it with chlorine in it. And as everybody knows, this past year, I had enough water for everybody in Richmond. I had water flooding my property. Now they want to add some more water going in there with chlorine in it. When I look at this map over here, I see all this land that's being redesignated, and they come all the way down to the corner here, next to my property, next to my house practically. Why can't they use something up the road a little bit, or away from it a little bit? Or use it down here, put it in down by the school. We own land next there, we've got plenty of land there. How about putting that there? Why do you have to put it next to a residential area? I mean, it's almost in residential area. If you're storing chlorine there, what happens if there's an accident? What about the property owners down here? How do they get protected? Flushing water out here, flushing water with chlorine in it, or if something happens to that pump house? Why do we have to put it so close to residents of the town? There's no other place in town that engineers can't figure out where to put this where it's not close to the residents. There's no other place in Richmond, is that correct? Is that what I was told?
Well, let's address, if you have questions, ask the council. If the council wants, they'll ask.
Excuse me, would you speak up a second?
Yeah, no, if address to the council, your comments, and if they want, they'll ask Mr. Ferrari to respond.
I'm addressing.
Yeah,
So-
Mostly, well,
So,
he looked
Mr.
like he
Ferrari,
was.
would you be able to address this question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's my problem. There's a lot of people over here in Valley Lodge. What's the danger of the chlorine? If it, for some reason, got out, and now you're saying that it's gonna be pushed out, it's gonna be flooded out. I mean, that's
It's gonna be a
that's not
sample
good
of
thing
the,
for residents, for taxpayers, for
it's gonna be a
voters.
sample
Not a
of
good
the,
thing.
a sample of the drinking water that everybody drinks. It's not gonna be a saturated, chlorinated sample of water, but, Bob.
Once a quarter, we got a little bit of chlorine in it.
Point of order, please, I know it's emotional, it's hard, we want to hear from you, but we want everyone to wait their turn so we can hear from you. Two people speak at once, I can't hear both of you.
All right, first of all, we are not using chlorine. We're using sodium hypochlorite.
Excuse, could you speak up? We can't, you're facing that way and.
Sure. We're not using gaseous chlorine. We're using a liquid form of sodium hypochlorite, which is a very dilute form of, it's a chlorine solution. Number two, the chemicals are stored and used in the pump house. Pump house is nowhere near anyone's residence, okay? It's an isolated area, you know, in close proximity to the river on a separate site, okay? So second thing. Third thing is that, as I said before, now again, I was not involved in the selection of this location for the monitoring station, but the monitoring station, you have two critical factors. You have to be far enough from the point of injection that the reaction, the disinfection reaction has not only gone to completion and you have a stabilized free chlorine residual in the water. Number two, it has to be before your first service connection. Okay, in this case, from the first connected house. Now, that is why it can't be, say, down, you know, in Wood River Junction or something, or down here at Town Hall. You have to be before the first service connection. So that's the basic criteria that was used to select this location. I do know that the design engineer performed, among other things, extensive hydraulic modeling to identify what he felt was the best location of the system. In fact, he's been doing the hydraulic modeling of your distribution system for probably a couple of decades. I can't, you probably know better than I do, but, you know, he developed the original model. And it's a good hydraulic model, and we continue to use him and that model today for occasional evaluations. So that's how that location got selected. Now, as far as the discharge from the monitoring instrument, as I said, it's a relatively small volume of water. It is not discharged on the ground surface. It is discharged into what we call a dry well in the ground. And the dry well is designed to allow the water to rapidly percolate into the ground. Now, the last question of concern, I believe, was, you know, the concern about this water has chlorine in it. It has a chlorine residual, and that residual is probably on the order of 1 or 2 parts per million or 1 or 2 milligrams per liter. And the reason the water is chlorinated is because it's to protect the public against microbiological, or otherwise known as bacterial contamination. It's a public health requirement, okay? Again, you know, we have no control over that. This is mandated by US EPA and the Rhode Island Department of Health, and it has to be done. And I will tell you that this past year, you know, we did have some incidences of positive results on bacteria monitoring in the system. Fortunately, it wasn't pathogens, but we had to go through multiple, rechlorination events and then resampling events. So this is not, this is a real issue, and to protect public health has to be done. I believe the design has been done in the most responsible manner. I can tell you it's been reviewed very extensively by Rhode Island DEM and Rhode Island Department of Health.
Does that answer your question, you know?
No, it doesn't, but that's okay. I don't get, I'm only a taxpayer.
Does anyone, ma'am?
My name is Alice Bolognese.
Just stand up, I'm having trouble.
My name is Alice Bolognese. I live on Watson Drive, the back of my property, about the right of way that goes into that property.
Right.
A concern I have is over the placement of the building in regard to flooding concerns. Is there any concern at all? Because that, I don't know exactly where it is, but when looking where you marked it on Dennis's map, it looks as though it could be in an area that floods, and it isn't, you know, in 2010, it was far worse, but it still is over with the fall and spring rains. It has flooded, so I'm concerned that, or I'm wondering why there isn't a concern over this machinery in that building and the placement of that. Are they aware of the extent of the flooding that happens there? And maybe a better placement of that building would be in order.
To respond, and by the way, that was an excellent question. The easiest part of the answer is that what we also did, and this was part of the evaluation that we had to do for the freshwater wetlands permit application to DEM, we had to evaluate flooding and if we were in a floodplain. This site, at least where this small equipment enclosure is going to be, is not in a 100-year floodplain. For that matter, it's not in a 500-year floodplain. And if you're wondering why I mentioned the 500-year floodplain, is because we have new federal requirements that essentially mandate that critical components of public water systems are not supposed to be in a 500-year floodplain unless you take mitigating steps to prevent flooding. Now, relative to the fact that you could have a significant storm event and probably could get flooding, you get flooding in a lot of places with a significant storm event. The little enclosure is mounted on a concrete pad. The concrete pad has an elevation sufficiently high above the grade elevation to prevent flood waters from getting into the enclosure. Okay, that's critical because if water got inside the enclosure, you have sensitive instruments and electric and electronic components in there. If we did have water intrusion, let's just say lots of things can happen and every one of them is bad. So we have to not only prevent water from getting into the enclosure, we have to minimize the opportunity for water, particularly flood waters, to get anywhere near the enclosure. So the pad mounting is above what would be anticipated as say ponding water, or short-term stormwater elevations, and an evaluation was done of the site. That was done, by the way, by the original engineer, and we reviewed that. I said probably a month or two ago when we put the application together for DEM. But legitimate concern, and I think everybody's done their best to address that because of those concerns.
Thank you. Does anyone have additional questions? Sir?
Hi, I'm Jim Sisson. I also live in that area. And my question is, we're told that there's no residential homes nearby. It's a 3-minute walk down the pipeline from my house to the pumping station. Is it gonna have an odor? No, okay. Is the chlorine solution dangerous in the pump house? My second part of that is, we've had small brush fires nearby. Kids have campsites and are kind of, goofing off in that area. Not my kids, I'm just saying it happens. So that's a couple of my concerns is that, so.
I'm not being patronizing here, I mean this sincerely. Good question again. All the questions have been very good. I appreciate it. All right, the sodium hypochlorite containers, you can purchase sodium hypochlorite concentrations as high as 15%. In this application, we're using a diluted concentration because we don't want to overdose the chlorine into the water. We have to control the dosage very carefully. Relative to anyone outside the pump house, you're not going to notice any odor whatsoever. In fact, chlorine, if you actually had chlorine gas release, which we're not using chlorine gas, it's actually heavier than it sinks down, as a matter of fact. But sodium hypochlorite, you would probably have to stick your head into the container to actually smell it. Particularly at this low dosage, we're talking like 5 or 6% hypochlorite. The issue of release or potential release, the liquid, there's 2 liquid chemicals, or there will be 2 liquid chemicals in the pump house. You already have liquid sodium hydroxide in the pump house, and we'll be adding chlorine to it. And in fact, I just made a modification to the installation design when we were going out to bid, because I wanted to be sure that both these chemicals, and by the way, they are compatible with each other. We absolutely had them within the containment area, and we're actually making some improvements to the chemical containment area. So if there ever was a rupture, say, of the container by whatever means that could possibly happen, any released chemistry would be contained within the secondary containment. As a matter of fact, for the hypochlorite, we actually are going to have tertiary containment because we've got the basic container it comes in. We've got a what they call a containment pallet that it sits on, which has 110% capacity, and that containment pallet is within a berm to containment area. So we actually have 3 levels of containment sodium hypochlorite. Relative to potential for mischief or vandalism in the area, I agree. We've always had some concerns. We've expressed them to the town, and as a general statement, we've made some recommendations, and we're looking for funding to enable the town to implement some enhanced security. I just recently sent a letter to Senator Reed's office supporting a finding of funding for, say, security cameras, as a matter of fact. So other steps are being taken in that matter to enhance security in the area of the pump house. I understand this gentleman, he said he can walk from his residence to the pump house through the woods. There's a pathway in about 3 minutes, but let's keep in mind that there is, that's fairly heavily vegetated wooded area. Also around this proposed, equipment enclosure that would be out there on KG Ranch Road, adjacent to it, we're probably gonna have some vegetation planted so we can at least soften the image of this, with some shrubbery in that area. I'll be more than happy to ask town officials to decide what kind of shrubs they would like there. It's not my decision.
So I have another question.
Sure,
Can I ask this gentleman?
sure.
Chlorine is gonna be in a separate location from the building that you're building not in my backyard, but right next to it. Is that true? Chlorine is gonna be stored up near the aquifer?
Sodium hypochlorite will be stored within the pump house.
No,
there's an important difference. So there's an important difference.
If kids got in there and for some reason decided to destroy all these containers, what would happen to the aquifer?
Oh, you would, but I just want to make sure that we're addressing council, just so if things get heated.
Yeah, I mean.
He asked if he could.
Yes.
I know,
We could.
I just want to
We
interject.
have time for it.
Yeah, I just want to interject. My interjection is, we could do the what ifs all night. What if an airplane crashed on the pump house? What if, Iranian terrorists that came over the border decided to, sabotage the pump house? But I mean, they're taking every possible precaution. And if you don't want something near your house, none of those precautions are gonna be enough to satisfy me.
I have a question. Is there an alarm system or something on it so that if anything was to happen, that somebody would be notified?
I'll address the gentleman's question first, and then I'll address the lady's
Please.
question. Okay, relative to if somehow there was, whatever means possible, a rupture of chemical container, we're talking small volumes. The largest volume we would ever bring in for sodium hypochlorite is a 55-gallon drum. And if there was a release and it then got outside the walls of the pump house, it wouldn't travel very far. It would seep probably into the upper soil layers where it would expend the chlorine would expend itself, oxidizing organic material in the upper soil layer. It's not a threat to the aquifer. Okay? And so that's the best way I can address that. But to get in the pump house, someone's going to have to get through the security fence. They're going to have to get through the locked security door. So someone's going to try reasonably hard. And by the way, people have tried reasonably hard to get through there.
Mr. Farrar, can I interrupt for just one more?
By all means.
The opinion you just gave about possible breach of the building and spilling of the material, contaminant. Is that your opinion as a professional engineer?
It's my opinion as a professional engineer. Thank you. Any opinion I offer tonight is my opinion as a professional engineer. Now, I apologize. Would you repeat the question, please? I do apologize.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was some kind of an alarm system so that if any kind of breach happened, somebody would be notified.
The short answer is yes, but let me explain. Number one, because we have this monitoring system on the water going into the distribution system, it's designed with alarm function. So number one, if there was an overdose of hypochlorite or an underdose, we get an alarm and we have to respond very quickly to that. That's just as far as the basic operation of the process. Number two, we have level monitors on the chemical storage. And if there was a sudden loss of the liquid in the storage container, we're gonna get an alarm from that, okay? Your system, just so everybody knows, you have local alarming right there in the pump house, and you also have a remote monitoring system. Okay, it's an internet-based system, and so that the alarms go out to a service provider, and then notifications come to the operators, okay, which is people who work in my firm, okay? So, and then, by the way, there's alarms for a lot of different things in that going on with your public water system and in that pump house. So, yeah, and we have, as a matter of fact, we have alert notifications, and we have, so if something's going in the wrong direction, we have alarm notification, but we've got something that requires an immediate response.
No, I'm just looking at you next.
Okay, does,
We got you.
does anyone online have a question? Oh,
Sorry, thank you. Tori Quinn, I live on Watson Drive as well, in the corner between the two of them. I thank you, first of all, for so patiently addressing all of our concerns and questions and for doing your due diligence. My question is about access to actually, build a concrete platform and fencing structure. I believe adjacent to our lot, there's an access way and there's also access way. So from Watson Drive, directly back into the woods, and then there's another access from KG Ranch. So curious if it's been decided, like how all the trucks and stuff will access. My concerns with that being, again, there was a ton of flooding this winter. Will, roads, makeshift roads or temporary roads be built? And apologies for not doing my homework and looking at the maps if they were available.
For future speakers, we're gonna need you to come to the podium because the mic is right there and people that are listening at home can't hear you.
I can't.
And I think the
can't.
council's having trouble.
Do you want me to come up?
Yes, if you have further input, yes.
Why don't you just restate your concerns?
Perfect. Tori Quinn, live on Watson Drive. My question is about if there's been a decided access way to build the concrete platform fenced in area. As I understand, there are two possible ways to access.
Thank you.
One of the wonderful aspects of getting a freshwater wetlands permit for a construction project is you have to define your limits of disturbance, which defines on this particular site what area can be disturbed. Also, you have to define your access to the area, and that is delineated on the drawings. If I remember correctly, access would be directly from KG Ranch Road, which is immediately parallel. To execute this project, we have to put in, first of all, you can't start construction until you put in erosion control. The erosion control is typically silt fences and hay bales that are staked into the ground. They are done inside the inside edge of the limits of disturbance, because you don't want to have anything getting off the site, say if it rains, because odds are in a construction project, at least of several weeks duration, you're going to have a rain event sooner or later. So we want to contain construction within a very closely defined area. We want to minimize runoff. We want to not have off-site or off-area transmission of any soil, debris, whatever. Number two, during construction, we're subject to DEM inspections, and I can assure you having been involved in many DEM inspections of a construction site, that if they come out there and they see something that they don't like, they're gonna know about it in before, while they're on site, and you have to take immediate corrective action.
Right.
So every effort is going to be made to, number one, we have to define access to the site. We have to define limits of disturbance. Those limits of disturbance and the materials and methods of construction are all intended to minimize adverse impact to the neighbors while executing the construction work in the most reasonably efficient and effective manner possible.
Did you have another question, ma'am?
Yes, I would.
Could you step up so we can get you on that microphone?
I was just wondering how tall the fencing is, or I know you said the concrete slab would be raised, but how much are we talking raised, and what's the height of the fence going to be, so it might preclude any children.
Thank you.
So. I don't have my reading glasses on right now. I apologize. The concrete pad is typically set at about elevation about 6 inches above grade. So drainage cannot flow onto the pad and potentially get to the structure, the little enclosure. Chain link fence, the security fence is ostensibly a chain link fence. The height will probably be 6 feet. And that's a fairly standard height. It could be higher if the town indicated they wanted higher for a further enhanced level of security. That's fine. One of the things we take into consideration is the higher you make the fence, that means you're increasing your potential sight lines from neighbors. So we're trying to, you have to weigh both of those factors here. You want to optimize security while minimizing visual disturbance of neighbors. Obviously, and it's not surprising, neighbors have expressed concerns over what they're going to be looking at, which is why I also advised that we can do some shrubbery on the exterior perimeter of the fence to soften the image, the view. And the enclosure is probably going to be on the order of about 4 feet high, 4 or 5 feet high with the height of the enclosure sitting on top of the concrete pad. So height would probably be roughly around this level. If I'm standing here, that's probably about the height of the overall height of the enclosure and the sitting on the concrete pad.
I have a question. So with this chain link fence, would it have razor wire and or barbed wire along the top of it? Something that would
I
stop.
would have to revisit the drawing, but certainly that can be done. Again, often when there are neighbors in proximity, often they actually express concerns about, if you have barbed wire or razor ribbon on the top of the fence, just because, kids love to go places they shouldn't go, and so again, we'll be more than happy to take input from the town on that, but right now it's basically garden variety chain link security fence, not locking gate.
I mean, I don't think we need more than that. I just had a question. Any further questions from here before we go online? Okay, can we go to the online?
Hi. Ms. Dunner, you should have permissions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I live very close to the site, and I'm concerned about the zoning changes because when the land was sold to the town, it was with conservation very much in mind because both my mother and father were very highly involved with conservation. And we're worried with a zoning change, what might happen in the future on that property, because as you stated, it's 28 acres. And we also have another concern, and that is that area in 2010 was underwater. Dennis would know better the height, but I believe it was at least 3 feet underwater during 2010. We would like our concerns about deed restrictions noted in the public record during this meeting. This is my sister, Mary Ellen. Right, with the public well vulnerable if it needs chlorination, we really want to make sure that the proposed flood abatement proposed 10 years ago, which mandated a huge detention trench right over the aquifer, doesn't happen. Because with the professionals that we had look at it, it would only be a few years before the water could be spoiled. So the deed restriction, we hope, is maintained with the new zoning.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's concerns, especially around the deed restriction, because when this came to us to advertise it for public hearing, that was my major concern. I was concerned that we were going to open up this property to more uses than not. And our town planner was awesome and explained it to me that that is not the case, that we are going to be preserving that. And the only new use that we're really adding is the ability to treat the water, which is really important for all of the Department of Health reasons that have already been listed. So I just want to say that I share those concerns, and those concerns were vetted through this. And this is not going to open any other doors to anything other than preserving our water. And another thing I wanted to mention just really quickly is, we had talked about shrubs and what it will look like. And as council members, we don't know what it's going to look like from your backyard. So I just wanted to encourage the public, after this is built, if the shrubbery is not what it's supposed to be, then come here, public forum, let us know, reach out. Because I just really appreciated all the discussion tonight, and I appreciated that all of the questions got answered. Quite honestly, they got answered well. So thank you all again.
Can I just get both their names for the record?
Can I have your names, ladies?
Mary Ellen Russell and Maggie Russell Dunder.
Thank you.
We both live at 120 KG Ranch Road.
Mr. President, is there anybody else online? No. Mr. President, motion to close public hearing.
Second. All those in favor of closing public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. President. Motion to approve, directly the vote, the amendment to the comprehensive plan and the amendment to the zoning map.
Second. All
Mr.
those in-
President, discussion, please.
Okay.
I just wanted to reiterate, just because I mentioned it briefly, that this was not an easy choice for me. I understand your concerns, and I feel like they were properly vetted. Like I said last time, we advertised it for public hearing. I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we did not. But these amendments are so that we can protect our water supply, which is so important to not only all of you, but so many other people down the water line, and a lot of our local entities. And we're making these amendments tonight. We can make amendments in the future as well if needed. So I don't feel like it's not set in stone. It's something that can change again if needed, and that's all I think I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda, Mr. President.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Now we have public forum, and I invite anyone to come up and identify themselves and speak about something that is not on the agenda. Sir.
Dave Bankson, Wyoming, Rhode Island. Something we've heard enough about drinking water tonight.
Yeah.
Last week, we got a public notice, important information about your drinking water monitoring requirements not met for the town of Richmond. So apparently in the second half of last year, samples that should have been taken for copper and lead in the drinking water were not taken. I understand that 10 samples are required every 3 years. 9 samples were taken during that period, but one was not. According to what is being done, before the next sampling period, the town of Richmond will send out a letter to request for water users to sign up to be a sample location. This will ensure enough samples are collected during the next sample. So, Michael, well, I guess my question is, how does that sampling work? I've lived here for 36 years, but I don't recall ever being asked to sign up to be a sample location. I could be wrong on that. But missing a sample for copper and a sample for lead seems to me to be fairly serious. And I noticed that it's 10 samples every 3 years. For comparison, I have to pay my taxes 12 times in 3 years. And if I miss a payment, I know who's to blame, me. And I know what the consequences are. I have to pay interest, the remaining money. So my question is, who's to blame, who's responsible, and what are the consequences? Thank you.
Unfortunately, the man who could answer that question just left.
He came.
Oh,
He was trying to find me. He loved it that much. He came back.
I didn't see you.
You should be doing
You
this.
know, if I may digress, there's a line from my Godfather. I was this close to getting that. Hold your back, you. Thank you, Karen. Okay, I didn't actually hear the beginning of the question, but I'm pretty sure I know where it was going, or where it came from. This is regarding, lead and copper monitoring. The good news is the town's record overall has been very good, which is why you're on triennial monitoring, which is once every 3 years. The monitoring programs are typically, you start out twice a year, every 6 months. If you have good results, you can go to once a year. If you continue to have good results, you can go to once every 3 years. If you all of a sudden have problems, then you can be reverted back to twice a year, 6 month segments. Now, why do we want to have, we need to have a sufficient number of sample locations. You're required to take 10 samples, okay, in a nominal round of sampling and sampling period. The problem is that if you only have 10 locations, for example, all it takes is one person being, say, on vacation or something like that, or maybe they went to Florida for the winter or whatever, but they're not available, or the access to the house is not available, and you've got a problem, okay? We have to have a good distribution of the sampling locations. They can't all be on one street. They've got to be distributed through the community, okay? They have to be accessible. So typically what happens in these situations is we might have 20 locations who've agreed, I'm making the numbers up, who've agreed that they'll be, if requested, they will be a sampling location, in this case for lead and copper monitoring, okay? To step back for a second, the purpose of a monitoring program is to provide a level quality control and quality assurance that indeed the treatment system is operating correctly and people are not being exposed to excessive lead or excessive copper, okay? And there are systems and communities around as well as the rest of the country who do have instances where that's occurred. And so we need to have a sufficient number of sampling locations. We need to have them on, in not just our records or the town's records. They have to be on the sampling program and the sampling locations have to be on file with the Department of Health, because we can't just come in and say, well, we were a little short, so we went to this other house and some house you never heard of, and we took a sample and here you go. So the key here is you got to have at least 10 samples. They don't care if you have more, okay, but you got to have 10, and you've got to have them within a certain time frame. And I can tell you for a fact that there have been any number of occurrences over the last, well, since 1993, when this program went into was promulgated, that many systems have been short on their sampling because someone couldn't get into a location, or whatever the reason was, a sampling person couldn't. Also, there's responsibilities with the sampling. The samples are supposed to be first draw samples, which means for a lot of people, that means that's a sample first thing in the morning. Well, I'm pretty sure no one wants me in their house at 6 o'clock in the morning And, I can assure you, my wife doesn't want me walking around the landscape at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to people's houses. So having said that, the program is typically, we provide the sample containers, we provide the instructions, typically give people an instruction on how to do it if they volunteer to be a sampling location. And then we send out notifications, okay, here's the time frame. We want to get these samples done so we can get the samples and get them all collected and then get them into the laboratory, so get our results and get them reported on time, okay? And that's the basics. Now, no homeowner is going to be subject to sanction if they, for whatever reason, don't get a sample. I mean, I can assure you that the person who runs my operations group will get a little agita, but no homeowner is going to get sanctioned or fined or anything like that. The responsibility for getting the samples is it's ostensibly on the town, and it's on your certified operator. Northeast Water Solutions is your certified operator. So we work very hard to work cooperatively with all the people who have volunteered to be approved sampling locations for lead and copper samples. It's no different than, let's say, the periodic bacteria samples we have to take, or any other water quality samples we need.
I'm on the water system. I was one of the first residential water system people because my well gets contaminated by lead and mercury, and a few other things. And same with my neighbor. I'd be happy to be a sample location so that we don't miss any.
So I'd be so happy to pass that along to my team.
Maybe this gentleman would also like to be a sample location.
I was the questioner. I'd be happy to be a sample location.
That is fantastic. We appreciate that greatly. Okay, because it is voluntary. Okay, and but it's necessary.
Right.
And we want to keep the town and the system in good standing at all times. And the key here is that we have the water quality analyses. We have the proper analyses at the right time so that we can make the correct judgments as far as how is the system doing? Are we staying in compliance, and are we protecting public health? That's what this is all about. It's not in any way a punitive program. I do want to stress that, okay? But we really appreciate people who volunteer these sampling locations and participate.
I took my water sample. I was considering a whole house filtration system, and I took it to the water filter company down in North Kingstown. And he said, your water is incredibly clean and you don't need to spend the money. Imagine somebody telling you don't need to spend the money.
Actually, we work with those folks a fair amount, and they're a top shelf group, and they're very honest. Appreciate working with them.
President, Bob, I want to say thank you very much for coming tonight. You're very informative, and you definitely earned your pay tonight. But I got to caution you though, if you do go to Mark's house to do the sample water, you got to be careful of that dog that's in the front yard.
I have a cast iron dog in the front.
Well, the good news is I love dogs.
I have a real dog too, but the cast iron one keeps the
That's a
deer out.
dangerous one.
Yeah.
Trip over it or something.
Someone tried to steal it once, but it weighs over 400 pounds when they do it. They just knocked it over.
Just one final editorial comment. It's always a pleasure to meet with the town, whether it's a planning board or council. Appreciate your time and your indulgence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Public forum, any other questions, anything online? Going once, twice, public forum is over and we're moving on to reports. And I ask for town administrator, Karen.
Thank you, Mr. President. First item on the agenda, my pleasure to introduce Carlton Viveros. He is applied for our position as the truck driver laborer for DPW. As you know, when Bob Doucette was promoted, that created an opening here. Carl has a CDL Class A, which is top shelf, Rhode Island hoisting license. He lives here in Richmond. He has great experience. He worked for J.H. Lynch in the nineties. He worked on the Big Dig in Boston. He left, construction to start his own landscaping business in 2002. And he's owned his own landscaping business since then.
Mr. President, after that glowing, I mean, it's like, wow. Move to approve the hire of Carlton Viveros as DPW truck driver laborer.
Tom, do you want to just stand up so they can
I always like the fact too that we hire people from our town. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
So, we have a motion and a second. How do you vote? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Welcome aboard.
Well,
Hey, can I ask you one question? Sure. How much can you bench press? I lift shovels and rakes and.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
No worries at all.
Don't feel like you guys need to stay.
Thank you. Don't turn around.
Oh, no. Gary, you might want to stay for this next bit.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Last four items is pretty much all the same. We posted 4 bids for paving jobs. Punch Bowl Trail, New London Turnpike, Wendy Lane, and Tuft Hill Road. All 4 had the same low bidder, Narragansett Improvement Company. Punch Bowl Trail, $343,442. New London Turnpike, $573,000 change. Wendy Lane, $122,000 and change, and Tuft Hill Road, $343,442.
Mr. President, move to approve the bids to Narragansett Improvement Company for the paving of Punch Bowl Trail, for the paving of New London Turnpike, for the paving of Windy Lane, and the paving of Tuft Hill Road.
second,
All those in favor?
discussion.
Okay.
I do have a quick question, because usually you include it in your memo, but it wasn't included here. I was just wondering, how this was getting paid for.
So 410,799 of the bid will be covered by the municipal road and bridge grant from the state, and the remainder from the bond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
that's it.
That's it.
All right, next up, have the chief.
Still awake, Lewis.
Thank you very much. I thought I heard you snoring.
Matter of fact, I learned a very valuable lesson. I'm not gonna sit at that corner very often. There's a spider landed on me. I feel a web around my head.
A web of intrigue, right?
Web of intrigue. So, I know we lost a little bit of the audience, what the time feel, but I wanted to, share something that doesn't normally happen. We get a lot of calls about crimes in progress, police arrive, people that perpetrated the crimes are often criminals. We investigated something that historically based on one person to one person. In other words, sorting for the witnesses and video evidence. We had a kind of a traumatic call on May 11th, Saturday night, 10 days ago. 3 separate 911 calls from neighbors of a residence in Richmond Ridge, which is 7 West Shannon, some subsidized housing there. Probably about 100 people living there, a lot of children. And they said that was a disturbance. They could hear yelling and screaming. Police respond. We had 3 officers on that night, thank God. The first officer to arrive was Sergeant Bellateri, which is not uncommon. He's usually the first guy to those scenes. He arrives, one of the neighbors comes up. Obviously, people are always worried about retaliation for calling 911 on a neighbor. These people were so concerned about the people inside, they were actually there to greet the police and point to the apartment that it happened in. As he approaches the apartment, you can see a 7-year-old girl hysterically crying. You know, when I say wailing, and terrorized, look completely terrified. She actually opens the door for the police officer, for Sergeant Terry. As she goes into the house, he announces his presence. Police, what's going on? And the disturbance, this 7-year-old girl now leads him into the kitchen and points. There are 2 adult women kind of like half standing, and then there's a 25-year-old man from Coventry who is literally dropping haymakers from this distance down to a woman seated on the ground, victim, an adult female. The thing that makes this complicated is it's completely chaotic, and there are 3 children between the ages of 4 and 7 in the house witnessing this thing. You cannot unsee and unhear these events. These are traumatic for everybody involved, including the police. Sergeant Theo grabs the suspect, kind of pulls him away from the victim, says, "Police, all done, you gotta come outside now." The suspect turns on him and initially challenges him, resists arrest. He gets yanked outside, put down in the prone, arrested without incident. And then he kind of goes along for a while and combats again when it's time for the rescue to check him out because he's a bit intoxicated. The victim suffered bruising around one of her eyes. And because of the hysteria, I think, the fact that it was so upsetting, she ended up having a respiratory distress issue. She had to get transported to the hospital. She stabilized overnight. 2 other officers arrived on scene. Now you're trying to sort out what happened, who hit who. Obviously, the male perpetrator. It's just very uncommon to witness an assault in progress and be there to see it. And I really believe if he had intervened, she would have suffered much more serious injuries. Fortunately, none of them are life-threatening. So it's a simple assault, disorderly conduct or engaging in fighting. It wasn't a relative, so it's not a domestic and resisting arrest. We found out after the fact there was another adult female that was in that vicinity that had assaulted the woman before the man did. So she was charged as well. I want to thank Hope Valley Ambulance for their efforts that night. This is about 8:30 at night on a Saturday night, and it was chaotic and it was prolonged. We needed 2 rescues there. And the police that responded, Sergeant Lateo, just a fantastic job as normal, intervening and the checking on the kids afterwards. DCYF came in, kind of assessed their well-being, make sure that they were okay, and they had what they need for a safe environment going forward. The Richmond school is always fantastic as a community partner. They're always kind of following up with these kids that have these events that happen. You gotta be very careful about sharing confidential information, but obviously the well-being of the children is often the most important thing. And that's pretty much it. Ryan Donahue and Paul Marshall were the 2 officers that responded.
It is so nice to have systems in place for this now. I grew up like that every weekend. I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry. Every weekend, my household growing up as a kid was that way. And the cops would come and they'd talk with my dad and he'd shake his hand and laugh and chuckle a few bit and get in the car and leave. So it's so great to have a professional police force that keeps people safe and a system in place that helps the children.
For sure.
Because that wasn't always the case.
I'm very sorry for your experience. You're not alone in that. There's a lot of people that have suffered in silence. A lot of people learn to deal with it, not in therapy, whatnot. Sometimes it's a behavior that kind of relives in future relationships, and that's what we're most afraid of. But I gotta tell you, even the people that run that housing development and the families that are there, we have very good partnerships with them. That kind of opened up right around the start of COVID. It was like September 2020. And you had a lot of people come in with past experiences from other police departments, and it's no slight to them, but you know what you know. And if you haven't met a police officer in the town of Richmond, you assume that they're like every other police officer you dealt with elsewhere. It took us a while to kind of forge relationships with the people that live there to explain, well, we're here for you. We want to keep you safe. We'll have social events. Women's Development Corporation that runs that, coordinates an ice cream social. I know Kate Schimmel has actually been involved in some of those. The elementary schools try to organize after school programs. We'll go and play with the kids, basketball after school. A lot of them are from that particular location. And the kids are great. And their relationships with police officers are much better now because of those things. But it takes constant. And you're only as good as your next interaction.
Right.
How you treat people is how you define yourself and how your future relationship will be. But we don't want anybody up there seeing that and not calling the police. Yeah, maybe it's a verbal and all there is conversations, but at least now we've tracked that there's a problem there. Future visits, follow-ups, if there's a pattern of behavior can be addressed. Worst thing you can do is not call the police, tell people to keep quiet, because then you get, I mean, these kids, when I tell you, I watched that body cam video, I felt like I was there. It was so upsetting to see these children so distraught. So distraught. So great job by everybody.
Well, the police department's personality, so to speak, comes from the top, and we really appreciate you. You're a great resource for the town.
Thank you, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
President, Chief, I have one question for you.
Yes.
If it's subsidized housing, is
It's a
there,
combination, it's lower income housing, and the units are beautiful. I know some members of council have been up there for the grand opening. It is what, those types of housing developments should be, and the maintenance staff does a great job on them, but people that live there normally live on a lease, and there are conditions with the lease or the rental agreement that they have to apply by certain rules in order to maintain that housing opportunity, because there are other people that are in line trying to get it. And if there are violations there, they will evict people, but, the majority of the families up there, they're very good families.
that was my question, is it kind of like a strike three kind of deal, to protect the kids that are there, that, you have calls that are pretty, predominantly the same call all the
It's
time?
not uncommon, and you can, it's probably no stretch of the imagination, there are certain dynamics in relationships, whether there's that's a domestic, situation between a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, and a man and a man, whatever. That when there's volatility there, and there's a history of problems in that person acting out violently, we're gonna get several calls over a period of several months. And all the same resources are providing the same information we're sharing with DCYF, we're sharing with the courts. The Women's Development Corporation is also made aware, sometimes they'll ask for reports through APRA. We'll provide them enough information so they can do what they need to do. We don't want people there that are, frankly, any congested neighborhood, where they're jeopardizing the safety of other people that live there. Those people, many of them pay to be there, at least some portion of their housing, and they deserve to feel safe, have quality of life there, and the kids deserve to be undisturbed by the actions of undoers.
It's a beautiful area.
It is.
Especially the kids, it's like, President Trimmer, responded to that, and he started to, break down a little bit. But it's just, terrible to have these kids exposed to this on a consistent basis. It doesn't do them any good in the long run.
No, not at all. And frankly, there are so many personal triggers each one of us have. And the way that we react, those types of visceral reactions are normal for an abnormal event. And that shouldn't be a normal event, but when it happens, a lot of us have personal connections to things like that. And it can generate that kind of experience. We want these children to have every opportunity to thrive.
Right.
And the ones that we've met from that particular development at the Richmond School at Charo, they're really good kids. They are. Frankly, they're kids. They're gonna make mistakes, but they love the structure of the school. They love the opportunities the school's provided with them. And fortunately, the relationships our SROs have with them has been really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have appointments and resignations. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I invite our financial director, Danielle, to give her report.
We just needed to clarify 2 weeks ago, the numbers were flipped on the ballot. It's correct, but when we talked about it, when you guys said it at the end, and then everybody, voted on it? Yes, the numbers were flipped. So we just wanted to clarify the numbers.
Mr. President, motion to approve the correction to the ballot question of financial referendum.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Which is again, the exact, as we went through this the last time.
29,853,772.
Thank you. Aye.
Okay. All right, next we have discuss and consideration Kellyanne Ward Miller appointed to the Wellness Committee with the term expiring November 30th, 25. Is Kellyanne here?
Kelly Lynn.
Kelly Lynn, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Time you need to let her talk.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm on call for the emergency room for the VA, so that's why I'm
Oh,
nervous
yeah.
about being here
Gotcha.
and checking my phone.
I'm on call for Children's Memorial Funds, but Yes.
Motion to approve Kellyanne Ward,
Kelly.
Kelly Lynn, sorry, Ward Miller appointment to the wellness committee with a term expiring when it's
Excuse me, Council Wilcox, are you gonna take my fun away? Because for 2 weeks, 2 council meetings, I've been trying to appoint you. All right, that's okay. Go ahead.
Do I have a second?
Second, yeah, sorry for the Zoom issue the
Okay.
first time.
We'd love to hear what you have to say, and then we'll.
Okay, so I've been a Richmond resident for almost 13 years now. I am currently a social worker at the Providence VA Medical Center for also that amount of time. I work with geriatrics, low income, and I do home care throughout the entire state. I'm a certified dementia educator. I do end of life treatment. Prior to that, I investigated and prosecuted elder abuse and neglect, and I worked as a social worker at Adam Hospital. So I literally spend my life trying to help older adults, help people with low income and get services. So when I saw that the wellness committee started, I was like, this is what I do every day. I was actually in labor with my daughter, sitting there helping the nurse get services for her father. So yes, so I was super excited when an appointment came available because I also spend a lot of time when I get the information currently now, I post it on the Richmond page and Hope Valley page, sharing services throughout with people, and helping people in the community, apply for benefits too. Already, I just do that in my spare time, just.
Wow, thank you.
Shelley,
So I feel this is a good match.
you come with a very well-rounded resume, and you have a great vivaciousness to you. You're gonna do great in that position.
4 hours of sleep.
Oh, my gosh. Good.
So how do you vote?
Aye.
Hi.
Congratulations, and we're blessed to have you.
Well,
Thank you.
Next, we have licenses. Yes.
Motion to approve the offer license application for Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Mr. President, move to approve the holiday sales license application for Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Mr. President, move to, file all the petitions, communications, petitions, and proclamations.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Mr. President, motion to adjourn.
Second. And how do you vote? Aye.
Aye.
Aye.